Good afternoon from London. Hi there. Welcome to Zoomed In Festival, and welcome to welcome to the Dezeen Virtual Design Festival. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Make sure you're commenting on the YouTube, following in real time. We're very lucky today to have Iñigo Bujedo Aguirre, hope I'm saying that right, joining us all the way from Barcelona. Hey, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you, Luke. Thank you for having me around, and thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much for joining us. It's really exciting to have you. I think, I speak for myself, but also a lot of people watching this. We have a lot of admiration for your work, and we're really interested to hear a bit more.
You're very kind.
So just a bit of background on the festival for those of you just joining us. So I'll come onto camera view now so you can see me. Hi there. So yeah, my name is Luke O'Donovan. I'm the festival director of Zoomed In Festival. And we're running a program of events all throughout the week about architecture, about photography, about how the two meet, and bringing in people from all kinds of creative fields that are doing interesting stuff. So today's part of our program with the Dezeen Virtual Design Festival, and shout out to Callum and the team doing the technical support behind this, making this happen. We had an audience of around 4,000 between all our platforms earlier today. So thanks everyone for tuning in and being part of this. So we've got a program all day with view pictures. We're going at 11 earlier, 2 now, 5 p.m. UK time. We have another talk this evening, and 7 p.m. UK time. We're ending with a screening today. So you can find all of that on all the Dezeen channels today, zoomedinfestival.com, at Zoomed In Festival on Instagram, and at Zoomed In Fest on Twitter. So I think, it's enough of me. We're all very excited to hear this talk. And yeah, let's go.
Okay, shall I start then? Is that my time?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So here we are. We're going to start. This is we came up with a talk when Luke and Dennis contacted me to offer me the possibility to participate in the festival. He suggested I would come up with a title to do with my work, and so I thought of the human landscape in architecture as something that would fit very much into what I've been doing for the last almost 30 years of profession. I am not a trained architect. I got a degree in social sciences and journalism, and then after 3 years working in Murcia, I'm from Bilbao, I went to London to study a master's degree in image and communications photography at Goldsmiths College, and that basically changed my life and my way of thinking and my approach to photography. So this is going to be a little this is going to be a little journey from the very early works that I photographed, and I thought I would start with this image to have a little bit of humor in these gloomy times of pandemia, which is affecting everyone around the world. In this tragic moment, I thought I would start with this image, which I took at the very end of my time in Goldsmiths. But that would be the end of perhaps the end of my career as a photojournalist, if you see what I mean, because at the time of being in Goldsmiths, I began to experiment with different formats, different techniques. It was a time of exploration and learning, and it was this image in many ways means the departure from the traditional photojournalistic school of photography I belong to, into something which would become then documentary photography, much more contemporary, and then the architectural photography, which I've been doing for the last 25 years. What I like about the image is the idea of juxtaposition, the idea of the irony, the idea of visual paradox, with a simple composition, very straightforward, which I think has got to do with my character as well, reflecting on the way I look at things, and going back to 25 years. I think this image is still very pertinent and very ironic, which is something that I think is very much present in my work. Here are two examples of the early works as well. This is Rafael Moneo when I was living in Murcia. He came because he was designing a city council building there. That was taken 35 millimeter black and white, tri-X, classic, documentary photography or photojournalistic. And in the other one on the right is Bernard Blauel, photographed in London. And this is just a different approach because now I'm using a medium format camera. It's a 645. The quality, the intensity of the detail, as well as the composition, using a tripod. So it was a clear departure from previous works I had done. And this is...
Sorry to interrupt you there. Would you mind, because these are great images, we want to see them as big as we can.
Yeah, sorry.
Command and L to go full screen on the PDF. We see those as best as we can.
So it's... so enter...
I think you can do Command and L to go full screen.
Command, how is it?
L for Luke.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Well, that's bigger. Is there something in the view menu?
File, let me see. It doesn't allow me. Yeah, full screen mode. Okay. That would be the biggest I can
Okay, that's fantastic. Thanks very much. I'll let you
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is a good example of the departure I was talking about. Previously it was 35 millimeters full frame. You see the edge black, which was the traditional way of printing by hand. Full negative, no cropping, very much in the tradition of Cartier-Bresson and Magnum early days. And this, as I said, it's a different type of camera. Rafael Moneo on the left, 35 millimeter here, Bernard Blauel, medium format already, all natural light, which is it's been a common feature, a recurrent feature in my work. I very rarely use flashes or any artificial illumination. And here it is perhaps an image that shows an inflection point in my career. It was 1997. It was in the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. I was with my friend Juan de la Cruz Mejías, who is a great photographer, the one who actually introduced me and taught me the basics and fundamentals of architectural photography and how to use a large format camera. This was done with one of his cameras, actually. I didn't have a large format camera at the time. So we did the story together. It was widely published. This photograph was taken with a Fujinon, I believe it was 617 or 618, a very fine large camera with amazing detail. She is the head curator of the Guggenheim Museum at the time. It was the day of the opening, and that was that really. From that moment, going back to London, the pictures were published, and that was something that changed my interest in photography, and I decided that I was going to continue doing documentary works and personal projects, but I was going to focus on becoming an architectural photographer. These are some of the photographs I continued doing while simultaneously investigating and learning about architectural photography. It was a very difficult trade at the time. There were no apps, there were no filters, there were no ready, I don't know, settings that you could purchase. I mean, you had to learn. It was very difficult. It was a lot of money wasted on film and process, but it was a very interesting process. These are later images I took in Barcelona as a personal project. Again, it's bringing out the idea of the outdoor, which I miss very much. I've been here in confinement for about 6 weeks. I think the world outside, as we knew it, is never going to be the same. The reason I chose these two images are because these are the people who are badly affected by the pandemic, and I thought it was pertinent to actually pay homage to them and the joy de vivre that they all show here at the age of late 60s, early 70s, retired and still enjoying life and trying to be fit and and have no inhibitions. But also, again, this idea of a straightforwardness at the time of approaching the subject is something which is very much present in my work, I think. Simultaneously, as I said, I was beginning to do my freelance work as an architectural photographer. I didn't have commissions at the time. So I would look for new projects, and I would go on my own with my camera and photograph them, and then trying to sell them to magazines. At that time, I joined, first of all, I was contributing to the Architectural Association Picture Library. And then after a brief period of time in Arcade Pictures, I joined View. And I think it's been now 14, 15 years. I forgot to mention that it was precisely at the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao at the opening when I met Dennis Gilbert, who is director of View, who became a friend, a good friend, and professional reference is his work. I always admire his work and his personality, which you can see in his work. So this is It's used Wineries in La Guardia in Spain by Santiago Calatrava. It also shows an ambition I always had of coming back from visiting a building and coming back with a sort of an iconic image of the building within the context. Context has always been very important to me. As well as the presence of humans, which I began to explore later on in my work, because I realized that what was the point of photograph architectural projects without people? I know this goes in fashions and in trends. There was a time in which everybody would do that. Then people were introduced, but because of the difficulties implicit to the film, it was very slow. So people had to be very still, no movement. Some people wouldn't like them. Sort of the blurry images of walking by or walking past people. So I decided I was going to start exploring that idea and introducing that passion and fascination for humankind and introduce that into my architectural work. So therefore, the way I approach to it is was basically composing an image from the rigor of the architectural discipline, and then wait for people to come into the shot without directing them. Very rarely I do that. Very rarely. I think it's just one image here, which I will show you later. It was a little bit of directed by me, but normally what I like is to wait for people to actually make use of the space, conquer the space, appropriate the space, which is something is been also recurrent in my work. Here again, now I was living in Barcelona. I came here some 17 years ago, and I began to document the transformation of the 22 Arroba in Paulo now, which is now, if you could now imagine how many buildings, amazing contemporary buildings, here now. But at the very beginning, Torre Agua became the new iconic symbol of the city. So I kept on going back, looking again for an image that would summarize this transformation of the city, and the ground is still, untouched, if you see, and this new iconic architectural landmarks being built, while people still do what they used to, playing football or just passing by. And here it is, an image which, again, I think represents an inflection point, because it goes back to the very first image, the idea of the juxtaposition and the visual irony. I think it's 2011 or something like that. I went to Avilés to photograph the opening of the Niemeyer Center in Avilés in Spain by Oscar Niemeyer. And I was there for about 3 or 4 days photographing the building while I was staying with friends that they live nearby. And this is something which is how would I say, is a very good example of what I want to do in architecture photography. The idea of photographing an image from, with photographing a building with rigor and depicting the forms, the shapes, the volumetry of the building, while still, trying to tell a story that transcends and goes beyond the architecture. This was the point in which I realized that I could look at architecture in a totally different way, while trying to please the clients, or to fit into the idea of representation of or architecture. I could also understand or look at architecture as if it was the theater of life, a great set, and the most theatrical sense of the word, sorry, in which the most mundane situations take place every day. I can see here, it's a narrative, it's a story behind this building, in which two men, challenge one another for the favors of this lover or lady, perhaps, but also, looking at it, it could be used, it reminded me, by chance really, but reminded me of a cover by Pink Floyd, Wish You Were Here, because of the colors and the combinations and the combination of shapes, forms, and colors. Yes, this is something, an image that going back in time is still function. I think is interesting to look at. The Cidade da Cultura in Santiago de Compostela by Peter Eisenman is a work that we did for Mark magazine with my friend Rafa Gomez Moriana, who is an architect and an architectural critic. He lectures as well, and we've done so many works together and so many articles together. He was writing the wording, and I was taking the pictures, and many contributions to Mark magazine mainly. It was very difficult to approach this project because the morphology of the buildings, without people, it would not make sense to me. It was kind of no man's land. So going around and walking around the place, which is huge, as you know, is unfinished, and I realized that incorporating people and giving the sense of the scale of the project was very important. So there was, as I said before, it was a bit like fishing, really. I would walk around, we would be walking and walking around the building, and then eventually I set up the camera to a composition which I'm happy with, and then I wait for things to happen. A very famous photographer, Joan Coulomb, said once to me, Iñigo, I'm puzzled by your images because all my life I've been waiting for a moment of tension for me to take a picture, and your images are beautiful, but nothing takes place, nothing really happens in them. I thought was one of the nicest compliments that anyone has ever made to me. Here again is it's a very mundane, ordinary situation in the city of Justice in Barcelona by David Chipperfield, in which a mother, after school picks up the child and brings la merienda, which is, a snack after school, and they sit there, it's winter time, they sit there in total silence in a place where normally is full of people and clerks and judges and solicitors, and it's very busy, and it was interesting to look at this place as in a moment of peace. It becomes this idea of a great theater, like architecture in the background. I'm interested in that. I'm interested in not looking straight at the building as the main subject. Is an ever-present element in my photography, if you see what I mean. But I'm also, though it is in the distance, I'm also interested in what's going on within that context, in terms of how people interact, how people behave in that theater. This is a very good example, again, of the ambition I had to actually find a personal speech, a personal language when talking about architecture and the urban landscape. I had been photographing this very small house by A&L studio, very lovely project, very small house. It was very, very small. I'm going to show all the images because this is just a brief introduction to the work. I went from bottom to top, and I was in the roof terrace, which is minute, as you can see. And then I was setting up my camera. I wanted to take a picture of the context with the tripod, of course. And then the lady, the owner of the house, who offered us a lovely lunch, came up. And then, of course, I took the picture. I have to say that after years of being a photojournalist, I still have the ability of that immediacy, that quick ability to actually anticipate things, which is not very architectural way of approaching a subject. Normally with architecture, one takes the time to put a tripod, composes the image, things, measures the light. Is a very thought, reflected process. Is not that immediate, but I have somehow managed to combine both disciplines, or both ways of working. And this is an image that I always introduce in my lectures with my students. They're probably laughing at me right now because I've showed this so many times. Almost every single time I saw this image. And if I was able to have a real-time conversation with you guys, I would ask you, what do you think about this image? Straight, without thinking. What is it that you think? What is it that you feel about this image? Most people would come up with the idea of dereliction, abandonment, green, old, poor, all features, perceptions that we have when we see an image. But going back to London, I reflect a lot, and I thought a lot about this image because it made me think how able I am to communicate what I want to communicate with my photography. Photography has always been to me a tool to learn, a tool for acquiring knowledge, and it's something that I always emphasize to my students. If I was to tell you now that this image is in Argentina, that the project is a social housing project by Rafael Viñoli and Solsona. Viñoli was a very young architect, and he was practicing at the studio of Solsona, I can't remember his name. And this is called Villa Soldati. And the element which is really relevant in this image is the Ford Falcon. The Ford Falcon is a symbol of the dictatorship. It was the car that was used by the military to abduct and take away political dissidents. Basically, with this information, your perception of the image would be completely radically different. And this is something that is not something that I reflected upon or came up with. This is something well explained by Umberto Eco in his book Lecture in Fabula, in which he explains the idea of cooperative interpretation, the idea of how a viewer, someone who is looking at visual text, and images are visual text anyway, would contribute to the process of extracting meaning out of an image. So this is something which, again, made me rethink my approach to photography. And of course, every time I engage in a new project, I documented myself. When I began to be an architectural photographer, I didn't know anything about architecture. Anything. When I photographed the Guggenheim with Juan de la Cruz Mejías, I didn't know anything about architecture. Nothing. What I mean, nothing is nothing. I didn't know what brutalism was, or postmodernism, or high tech. But then, within years of photographing and resolving visually, understanding, putting order in this visual chaos, I began to understand. I began to learn. I began to know. And I began to acquire some degree of knowledge. Again, another inflection point in my career was the Architectural Association Commission in Linea and Geo, and the last humanist, when I was asked by the curator, Brazilian architect and curator Ana Araujo, to go to Brazil to photograph the works of Dina Bobardi. This, of course, happened in the house of my dear friends, Barbara Penner and Paul Softley, who I was staying with. Barbara is a professor at the ballet, and as well as a very dear friend of mine. He's always been a great influence in my career, always advising me, always giving me good tips, always telling me of what should I do, what shouldn't I do, and I'm very grateful for that. Okay, so Anna had the opportunity to look at some of my pictures which hung in the house, and then after talking and conversing about the possibility of working together, she confirmed that she'd like to commission me to work in the project, in the exhibition she was creating. So so we went to Brazil, and we went together for a week. I think it was about 10 days. And then the idea was to revisit all of Lina Bobardi's works, and with a totally different approach. The idea was not to go and photograph again the architectural projects in a way that they've been photographed endlessly. But the idea was to actually have a different approach, a much more humanistic, to do with her understanding of what it was architecture and the purpose of it. So Anna was generous enough to give me freedom, total freedom, to actually approach the subject the way I wanted. So we proposed different ideas. In this case, this is the MASPI, is the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sao Paulo, and the idea was that I would try to describe the life that takes place within that space, that piazza, that plaza, that square that is underneath the floating structure of the building. And I was there just that. I mean, as I said before, my approach to the project was, or the way I work is mainly I compose the image in a sort of with the rigor of an architectural photographer using a tripod, tilt and shift lenses. I raise, I compose, I make sure that the parallels and verticals and everything is correct, and I'm happy with that. And then I wait. And I could see here, this is so much going on here. I'm going back to the idea of this image. I show you Buenos Aires and this Falcon car. Can one be political when photographing architecture? Can I just go beyond just the idea of idealizing architecture and of the peak in architecture? And can I go deep into what's going on in real life? I think this is a very interesting point, and I think it's, to be honest with you, now in the times we are now living, I think it's even much more relevant. Here we have a Chinese couple doing the Tai Chi, pair of lovers, the police, homeless people, all happening at the same time, together, by the Avenida Paulista, which is the center of the business and economic power in São Paulo, in front of the Trianon Park, which was another interesting element, important element in this project. The idea was to put relation between the space, the piazza, the occupation of the space, as well as the this original primitive forest that still remains in the city. And you see the Avenida Paulista is there as well. These are two of the images I thought I saw you with this project. The next one was Sex Pompeia, and again, the ritual of composing an image is exactly the same. It's as if I was working for a sort of a specific architectural magazine, composing the image in a way conforms with the architectural discipline, but waiting for something to happen. I was fortunate enough that just about I was finishing to compose the image and just about to shoot. And these two girls, the ballerinas, come from the other side of the factory, which is now converted into a community center, and they're going to go to the ballet classes. And that was a gift, a chance that I was fortunate enough to actually captured. And then this became the most iconic image, perhaps, of the entire project. Here we are. As I said before, I very rarely photograph people. No, sorry, let me rephrase this. I very rarely direct people when I photograph architecture. I don't like the idea of putting people on top of roofs and, very glamorous ladies, walking by pools and things like that, which has become very fashionable these days. I mean, with all due respect, but it's not my style. I come from a much more um, 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 natural, straightforward, journalistic approach to representing and depicting life, which is what really like to do. So here are two images. One is obviously taken from below. This man was showing the child the height of the building, which I thought it was rather risky. But anyway, and here on the left, these ladies, they all wonderfully glamorous and great. I mean, how could I describe them? They were coming towards me. I had to set up my camera. I was going to take the picture of this composed image, and suddenly they were asking me, can you take my photograph? Can you take our photograph? And so, of course, and suddenly they posed for me, but it was spontaneous. It was very natural. It was very fresh, and you can tell the expression in the light. There's a picture I'm in love with. The more I look at it, I think it's great. I mean, the costumes, the expressions, the cultural diversity. It represents everything we used to like Brazil for. Sadly, it's going through darker times these days. And again, this is part of the project that of the images that we produced there. As I said, we were there with some students from the architectural association, and we were there for a week. We visited São Paulo and Salvador de Bahia. Again, is the very mundane, to work as, having a quick chat in the middle of the day shift, what really interests me, so my idea of approaching architecture and looking at it is very tangential. Instead of it's like moving the camera a few degrees in order to actually focus on the human element or in the frame, and putting architecture somehow behind the people. This is the Teatro Oficina in São Paulo. Great piece of work. I mean, what an amazing building, what a simplicity. And this was a woman who, they were doing rehearsal, and they were doing warming up because they were going to be rehearsing for the performance that they do twice a week, I think it is. They've been doing that for the last 25 years. And that I had the fortunate, the luck of she was there playing with the dog, and she was doing the warming up. So I could put that height and that space in context in relation to the person who was there. Another opportunity, and that was my first opportunity, is in Bilbao, because I was born in Bilbao, but I never had any I don't know how to explain this. When I left Bilbao, it was a very difficult time. It was an enormous crisis. It was terrorism. It was political tension. I could not confront the city in a way which I was comfortable enough to actually photograph it. So I was lucky enough to actually be able to be commissioned by the Cuna Centroa. It's a new building that has been there for about 10 years. It was designed by Philip Stark. The curator of the exhibition was Elisava, perhaps the most reputed and famous architectural critic in Spain. The art director was Angela Molina, my friend Arola Toes did the setting up of the exhibition. So it was a collaboration between 4 people and the institution, and the idea was to actually photograph the city in the aftermath of the Guggenheim effect, which has been much discussed in most colleges today. The idea how an architectural landmark would transform the city. Again, it was not about looking at them or focusing entirely on the buildings, though the architecture becoming part of the landscape, of the theater in which mundane things would take place. I'm very happy with this image. It's hanging on my wall. And the reason for that is because when it was up in the exhibition and at the day of the opening, we received a call from the lady saying that she refused. She didn't like the idea of being in an exhibition. She hadn't allowed me to do so. I do have a video of me taking this image. But sadly, we had to take it down, and I think it's a great image. But I mean, here it is. I'm showing it to you because it conveys many of the ideas that I've been discussing here. You know, the idea of the certain degree of humor, the idea of having a wider view in order to contextualize the architecture, and a composition which is very carefully measured in order to distribute the elements to obtain a well-balanced image, well, at least according to what is my understanding or what is photography. Simplicity, straightforwardness, honesty. Here we have the same situation in which the architectural landmarks, which, to be honest with you, people from Bilbao to begin with, they were quite horrified of the idea of the Guggenheim and everything was new and modern. It was a very traditional society, but now they embrace it with great love and passion. And these are some of the photos I took. They weren't exhibited at the time, but I thought it was important to actually bring them up. And we have here social housing in Pormecheta by ACXT. And then the Verdola Tower in Bilbao by Cesar Pelli, but next to it is the Rectorate by Cesar Pelli. This is Rafael Moneo. So these are really important architects that, as you know, Bilbao is now dotted with buildings by almost every mayor or, you know, Pritzker Prize, really. Here is a different point of view. You see what I mean? This is the building here, and I'm here on the side, and a different point of view. Again, architecture becomes something which is in the background. That was the idea of the narrative, which we wanted to introduce in this project. This social housing block. Again, I was not trying to re-photograph this project, which had been widely published by other photographers and featured in many magazines. The idea was again to depict life within those buildings, how these gardens and relationship between the neighbors. That was basically the theme of the exhibition. All ladies, perplexed and not quite sure what I was trying to photograph them in this building, which is the Conservatory of Music by Roberto Ercilla and Miguel Ángel Campo. And this traditional Basque family, you know, is something that they would do. That, you know, they would go for a walk and then they sit and enjoy the weather and have a chat. It's something very ordinary, but I have to say I miss ordinary things. I miss going out. I miss going to the beach and seeing the people I love, and it's a very strange time. Again, cuts in the air. This is scary because again, it was Barbara Pena who gave me the name. She came to visit here in Barcelona, and I had few ideas in my mind. I had done a workshop with with Mark Power here in Barcelona in 2009, and in which I began to explore and photograph housing estates here in the outskirts of the city. It was again going back to those days in Camberwell when I was fascinated by these high-rise towers that I never seen before, because where I come from in Bilbao, there aren't any. So I remember talking to Barbara, and then Barbara suggested that I would read Tower and Slab by Florian Urban, which is a very interesting and amazing book, and then gave me a totally different approach to what I wanted to do. And also she said, Iñigo, I was sort of, filling with ideas for the title, and whether, urban dystopias, and she said to me, "Oh, this is very, very well. It's too much. Is wasted. That cash is in the air." And I thought it was brilliant. So I borrow it, and this is something that I've been working on for the last 10 years. Coincidentally, sorry, let me go back to this. This was an exhibition of part of the work was exhibited in 2018 by Claire, invited by the London Festival of Architecture, thanks to Claire Richards, who, Claire had commissioned me to photograph a project for her about 3 years before. And then as she was on my mailing list, she got newsletter with some of the images I'm going to show now, and then she replied to me and said, "Iñigo, this is fascinating. I'm really interested in that, and then I like to help you with this." I say, "Okay, that'd be great." And then one day she came and said, "Listen, I'm going to sponsor your exhibition, and I propose it to the London Festival of Architecture, and they would like to offer you an exhibition." So that was like, wow. Thank you very much, because it was an amazing experience, and I had the opportunity to actually show part of the work which I'm still working on. Again, this is the idea of looking into the more less glamorous architecture, and confronting in times where housing is such a sought after commodity and is so expensive. I began to photograph and to visit all those barrios and neighborhoods and areas which nobody goes to visit when they go to cities. This is Block 23, New Belgrade in Serbia. Again, the human element in my work is ever present, and I'm not looking into actually going into detail into the feature of the architectural design. Some people think it's very ugly. I think it's very beautiful. It's quite remarkable. The idea is to actually have wider, more kind of panoramic landscape, if you want images of these areas, of these places. This image of Genex Tower goes back to the image, is very much related to the image of Buenos Aires, in which I was telling you about the idea of different meaning and different layers, and the importance of having knowledge about the history of the place. And while I was composing this image, this mother with the child came, by, and they were heading towards the flat where they live in, and I was fascinated by the idea that the child is dressed in a military fatigue, and has a sort of a rifle, sort of an automatic, I don't know whether it's AK-47 or an Uzi or whatever. He was dressed as a chetnik, and this is something that happened barely, 18 years after the war in Serbia. So there was a lot of meaning in that image, and it's something which it takes a little bit of knowledge of history to understand that. But I think it's important that we do keep memory alive. It's not to do the same mistakes that we did in the past. This is Gropius in Berlin. I was amazed by this place because if you remember the film Christine F., the Zoo Bahnhof children with David Bowie. Is about in 1980s. Is probably the most famous, best-selling book and film in the history of Germany. I think it is. And I was amazed to see these places, which are huge in many ways, but there's no life there. Coming from Spain, in which in every single corner you have a shop, you have a bar, you have a terrace where you can have a drink, when you can sit. These enormous places were perfectly organized with amazing in green spaces, but there was an amazing degree of sadness and solitude in those areas, which in many ways fascinated me and attracted me visually. Again, this is part of the project also in Berlin. Hodge Bunker is a famous bunker, which a building which goes over the bunker. And the idea of this project is that because they have large format images, though what they take in digital, they have a great deal of detail. So I'm interested in the idea of how every single individual settle in these tiny spaces, and they customized and they bring their own personalities within the terraces. And also, of course, I was very interested in who lives there, because normally there's these constructions or buildings that they've been built in order to accommodate migrants and people from other parts of the world. So this is actually the Turkish, I think it was Iraqi community. I'm not entirely sure. They wouldn't speak any English, but they were very nice to me, and they allowed me to photograph that. And I quite like the idea of confronting these situations. It's more vernacular here on the right, and the sort of the architectural, modern architecture, and the space that is generated in between. Here's Alexandra and Ainsworth Tale in London by Neve Brown, and this is this Muslim woman chasing the child that's forgotten the jacket. Probably she's going to school or something like that. And I was just there. It's a very simple, straightforward image again. Using the ritual. 24mm shift lens, tripod, long exposure, and that's that really. But also, again, looking into the more intimate details of the people who live there without actually being invasive and intrusive. I'm interested in this kind of situations. The little garden, the little palace, the little Eden, built here in a place which has been in many ways looked upon with disdain and fear and prejudice, really. And I thought it was actually wonderful. Here again, instead of looking at the building is straight, from the sort of a much more sort of orthodox way of approaching architecture. I wanted to photograph this project by Lacaton Basal within the context, but not just from the point of view of the terrain, but also the people, which is, as you see, is kind of an obsession for me. So I thought, these two women, Muslims, sitting down there. I'm not interested in their faces in this case. I just wanted them as these are the people who live here. I photographed some areas in France. As you know, there's a degree of segregation with France. It's different than in England and in Spain. France, they tend to be pushed towards the outskirts, and I'm interested in exploring that as well as a reality, as a political reality. Again, can one be political when photographing architecture? We run out of time, and we want to allow some time for the talk. So I'm just going to go very quickly through these images. Is Robin Hood Gardens, again, same features and ideas than before, going into detail, wondering what's going on behind those curtains, who lives there, why are they there, this is about to be demolished, was about to be demolished, and it's already demolished. This is the human landscape instead of presence by absence, which is something that also fascinates me. Is the idea of what is left over when we leave, when we are not there. Now I just got a video from my brother that wild boar are running, free in my hometown, and reindeer and things like that, and I'm fascinated by that. And this is the image that concludes. This is the great theater of life, architecture as the great theater of life. And that was the project I photographed. In Paris. That was last October, and that was that. So thank you very much. That's the end of the presentation.
Well, thank you very much for presenting that. Yeah, this is the sort of thing I don't really want to, be here asking questions. I want to spend another hour just going through your PDF, looking at the images all in detail, getting everything in. Such a kind of a wealth of imagery you've made over the years. Really phenomenal stuff. So thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you. Do send me questions if anyone interested in forward.
Yeah, so thank you to everyone that's tuning in, both on our Zoomed In Festival channels and also on Dezeen and everywhere else. We've had hundreds of people watching, loads of great responses to the images, lots of good questions. So we've got a couple of minutes. I'll try to get through a few of them. One thing that struck me kind of looking through your images is we have really nice individual images, really well captured, say a lot about places. But what I like seeing this whole presentation is you're seeing how the world's changing over time. And it's something, as a younger photographer, I'm only just really starting to appreciate how my archive is this documentation of change. And I want to ask, as you get more experienced, as you go back to places, photograph them again, do you have it in the back of your mind, but you're not just creating this single image, you're creating this documentation over a period of time?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question. So can you repeat that again? I mean, I understood the introduction. I don't quite understand what you're asking exactly.
So what I'm asking is the idea that you're not just making a picture, you're making a bigger part of a story within your archive. As you get more experience as a photographer, are you thinking about that when you take the picture, or is that something that comes afterwards?
No, it is very much. I think it's something that was put forward this morning as well. The idea of making stories, the idea of trying not just to idealize a building, or the idea of compiling them. At the end is a life experience. Is the way. How do I confront the world? How do I put an order in this chaos that I was asked to deal with and to live with? I remember going to Buenos Aires. I didn't understand anything. And the only thing I could, it was huge for me. It was immense the first time I went there. I didn't understand that. It did not conform with what I had in mind, or what I read, or what I'd seen in the films. So the only way I had to actually deal with that was through photography. There's a famous video by Richard Avedon saying, photography is a tool in which you can confront what you fear. You fear life, you fear love, you fear women. So therefore, by taking the camera, you photograph that, you exercise, you catalyze that feeling, and then you lay the ghost. And at the same time, if you're doing decent professional work, that's something that's quite positive. And I am aware that I have this tendency of going back to places. I like going back to places. I think traveling is not just discovering new places, it's going back again and discovering new things within the terrain that you already visited and walked through. So yes, I suppose. I mean, the last 6 weeks I've been looking at my archive, and I realized that I do have I don't know whether it's a wealth, but I do have a collection of maybe 50, 60, 70 images that I'm proud of. Yes.
Yeah, great. And it's this. I think when we're in this, surreal situation where the normality is taken away from us, you get a bit of a step back, and looking back at your images, you can really see the value in documenting those things that. I mean, some of them you describe them as, a mundane situation, but that's a situation we can't access right now. So having that recorded in an image is really valuable, I think. So we've had a few more questions. We had, so you said about kind of how your photos are like an unspoken collaboration between you and the people in it. And it'd be interesting to talk a bit more, about ways in which that works. And we've had questions from Andrew and from Roshan of similar to these themes. So about kind of some people asking about the technical details of, I
mean, my technique is very straightforward. I mean, in fact, I'm using a very sophisticated camera, and I'm probably using something like 20% of the features. It's just natural light, I'm trying to work with my digital camera as if I was still with a large format Linhof I had for 10 years. I compose very simply, not trying to overdo it. I don't try to or to be, to impact, to create a visual impact that just only, oh, amazing. No, I much rather have, people looking at my images again and again, and looking at them in a way that they can discover some things, new things, and they can dive into that, and understand. At least I'm trying to understand a little bit of what the way I understand life and the way I understand the world, and the chaos it is, and how I'm trying to put order into that.
Yeah.
And my unspoken collaboration, I suppose you relate to the people in the images, or?
Yes, I think kind of something I thought was interesting is the idea that your photography is a very honest style, and is it's about creating snapshots of the time that we're living in, but is maybe the honesty of it compromised a bit by the act of a photographer. So the way that if people see your camera on a tripod, they might walk around it because they don't want to be in your way, whatever. How do you balance that act of being honest, but also trying to not affect the scene yourself?
I think, it's changed a lot. I mean, when I was working with my Rolleiflex, people would not take me seriously. So could
I add to that as well? Also, we've had people asking about, because you do a lot of work internationally, is that a different approach within different cultures?
Absolutely. I mean, I know not just different cultures, it's changed a lot. I mean, this morning I was looking at, I was listening to Dennis. Dennis had a picture in the background by William Klein. It would be impossible to do New York again. But not only that, my early pictures was so spontaneous because people would pose in front of me. And when I was wearing my Rolleiflex and large format camera, people would not take me seriously. Now I've been in a situation in which I put my camera with a tripod and people interpel me, they come to me and say, I don't want to be in the photograph. I don't want to be photographed. Well, I'm not photographing you, but go away. They become really aggressive. So the whole world has changed. But I also say to my students, there's nothing wrong with it. You just talk to the person, engage. If there's a problem, and if they don't want to be photographed, or they get really nasty, you just walk away. There's no point in getting into a fight because of that. I could easily do that, but I mean, what would be the point? I think it's much simpler than that. I'm just doing something that harms no one. I'm just doing my passion, which is what I've been doing for the last 30 years. I don't think I've hurt anyone doing this ever.
And I think a lot of photographers watching will have sympathy for what you're saying there. Another line of question we've had is quite good. So we had questions from Ariel, from Sachin about this, all over the world, people coming. So I thought it was really interesting how, you're an architectural photographer, but you said you have no knowledge of architecture. But I think, at the start at least, I think that's maybe not quite the right thing to say, because maybe you don't know how, you don't know about Bruceism, you don't know about high tech, you don't know, the mechanics of how a building stands up, but you've spent your whole life living within architecture. And I think you've learned about architecture in a different way. And also we've had people asking, is, through your photography, has that shaped the way you understand architecture differently as well?
Absolutely. No, I didn't know anything about architecture. I was not aware of anything architecturally at all. So for me, doing architectural photography, urban landscape, urban design, interior design photography, it meant that it opened me an opportunity. It was a tool. Photography is a tool for me to actually increase my knowledge, to widen my culture, my understanding of the world, being interested, opening windows of interest for me, which was not before. I mean, I've always been interested in politics, in history, in arts, but I didn't know anything about design. I didn't know who Jean-Jacques Jacobs was, or who Mies van der Rohe, or who was Le Corbusier, or who was Zaha Hadid. I didn't know anything. I met her, But you know, I didn't know anything about her until I went to photograph the building, and I went to photograph the building without any prejudice or prior knowledge. I knew the building was going to be built. I thought it looked interesting. I went there. I photographed it my own way. With many times without a commission. So therefore, I had the freedom to actually do the interpretation I wanted to. I didn't have to comply to any brief. And then when I had briefs and commissions, and it was also very nice because most of the times I've been very fortunate to work with people that they were really open to discussions and to engage in saying, okay, Iñigo, this is what I try to do. See where you can chip in, see how you can contribute and sort of better in many ways the project by doing your approach. You know, at the end, representation of the building is just one of the many possibilities. You know, you and I, we could go to the same building together, and we come up with similar, but they're very different approach and different understanding of the space, of the light, of the volumetry, of the landscape, of the urban tejido. I can't remember the English
the
word.
Context.
The context. Yeah. I can't. I mean, my English is kind of.
No, you've done a great job. So thank you.
I'm forgetting the word. Yeah, sorry.
One last question from Ariel, again watching on Dezeen. So thanks everyone tuning in. Just a sort of a more light one. Bit of fun. Any books, movies, any you can recommend for the lockdown? What's keeping you amused?
Books.
You have a book you're selling?
No, I'm not. I'm trying to finish my book, The Wall of Yesterday by Stefan Zweig. I think it's compulsory to everyone. I mean, it's a book that everybody should read. The Wall of Yesterday by Stefan Zweig. And I just watched Unorthodox. I'm not very much into series, but I just watched Unorthodox, which is Netflix, and I strongly recommend it as well. It's about liberation, fanaticism, very fascinating, and great actors, great production. You know, it's based in New York and Berlin. I've never been to New York, but I love Berlin.
Right. Well, I think that finishes up nicely. Another thing I'd like to add, if you are in lockdown, you're looking for things to do, well, you're in luck because we have all this week. So starting today right through until Friday, I'm just gonna, if you give me a moment, I'm just gonna share my screen. So Zoomed In Festival, by the way, for those of you who haven't tuned in from the start, my name's Luke O'Donovan. I'm the festival director for Zoomed In. And today we are streaming together with the Dezeen Virtual Design Festival. It's a bit of a tongue twister. But we're online at zoomedinfestival.com. You can see, so we had this talk, today's put together by View Pictures, an image library led by Dennis Gilbert, who's been really good helping us curate this program with a lot of the international photographers he's involved with. So we've had 2 great talks already. We've got 2 more events later today. So at 5 p.m. UK time, or that's 12 p.m. New York, 1 a.m. Tokyo, if you're doing an all-nighter, our panel discussion, Images and the Media, featuring a lot of the photographers and also chaired by Manon Mollard from the Architectural Review, talking about the way their images are used in the media and how that changes our perception and experience of architecture. And we've got a nice little one for the end of the day, 7 p.m. London time, 2 p.m. New York, or 3 a.m. Tokyo. Dennis Gilbert and Jim Stevenson are going to be screening a couple of their films, including this one with a very tasty still of Peter Zumthor's house. So yeah, get into that. And we're on Wednesday, Thursday and Friday as well. Alongside our live events program, we are running a bit of a fundraising effort to kind of make a statement as the architectural photography community. So we're going to be supporting the Trussell Trust, which supports food banks around the UK. And we've launched our affordable print sale. We're going to add some more to this throughout the day. I'm just updating the website, where it's a chance for a lot of the contributing photographers have put forward some of their best images, and it's a chance for you to get them at a really good price. You know, these are kind of things that will hold their value, will look great on your wall or a great gift, whatever, starting at just £25, which isn't normally a number that would come up in a discussion like this. We've got some really good photographers and we're adding a whole load more. So go on our website, there's loads of stuff there. our social media at Zoomed In Festival on Instagram, at Zoomed In Fest on Twitter. We're on YouTube, website, Instagram, Twitter, everything. Look out for us, get in touch, and yeah, we hope to see you again. So yeah, again, thank you to Dezeen Virtual Design Festival for co-hosting, and we'll be back soon. So yeah, take care, and Inigo, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Luke. It's been a pleasure, and you've done an amazing job. Thank you to Dezeen, thank you to Dennis Gilbert and View, of course, because as well as friends, they're my agents in London, and they created me. They invited me to be part of here, and it's been a real pleasure. I think it's been a very nice experience, and you know, I look forward to seeing the rest of them.
To anyone who wants to get a bit more of you and hear what you have to say, where else can we find you on the internet?
Type my name, and there's only one my name. I mean, at the very end of my presentation, I think I forgot to at the end of my presentation, I think it was my website is Iñigo. Here it is. You can find me. Most of my architectural photography is with View, and the rest here is if you type my. Sorry, I'm not going to open now, but I mean, you can go into my architectural website, and then from that you go into my documentary website, which is unfinished, but you know, you'll see some of the images I've taken over the years.
I've never met a photographer who's finished and happy with their website.
Well, hopefully not.
we're always adding new stuff.
I just saw another photographer, Mark Powers, Magnum Mark Powers, I mentioned before. I did a workshop with him. It's taken 3 years for him to actually do the website, and his website was brilliant, but his new one now I think it's much happier.
Okay, cool. Well, again, yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks for tuning in, and yeah, we'd love to see you back at 5 p.m. UK time. Okay, take care. Bye.
Thank you very much, Luke. Great.